Today's AskReddit post. What's the most supernatural experience you've ever had? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. My remote once jumped off the TV by itself. The old toolbox type of television. When I was watching with my girlfriend, it didn't fall or slide off. We actually saw it take a leap as if somebody threw it. We both just sat there being really confused before even questioning it out loud. I used to do pest control. Went to a customer's business for the first time. As I walked in the office, I noticed some pictures that were supposed to be hanging on the wall were on the ground, and then saw some papers which looked like they had been thrown and scattered off a desk. I picked everything up so I could apply treatments to the floorboards and surrounding rooms. I then went to treat the only restroom in the office. I simply knocked on the door as a courtesy, as I always do before entering any restroom. There was no reply, for nobody was in there, so I went and applied treatments to the restroom and I closed the door behind me. As I walked away from the door, I know I heard somebody grab the door handle, twist it open and open the door. I turned around and looked to see nobody behind me but a door swinging open. The hair on my neck instantly stood up and I put 2 and 2 together. I grabbed my shit and ran downstairs. The receptionist saw me and started laughing. She asked me if I had met their little friend upstairs. It was a ghost. She told me she hears it walking around upstairs every day and they can't keep things on the walls or people's desk. They simply just got used to it. What in the duck? How do people just casually accept that? You're telling me you don't have an office ghost? Yeah, but it's usually HR. When I was 16, an uncle, dad's brother, passed unexpectedly. Weeks later, I had a dream about him and he told me to quit smoking cigarettes. It was way more involved, but it's been 20+ years, so I don't remember the rest. A month or so later, I mentioned the dream to my parents and my dad started crying. Got up and walked away. Apparently he dreamed of talking to his brother too, and he'd told my dad that he, uncle, needed to talk to me. When I was around 12, my mother had to go out of town for a bit and she left me home alone for a few days. We lived close to relatives, so it wasn't a big deal back then. She refused to give me a mobile phone because she figured she could just call me on the landline if anything came up. She told me the date when she'd be back, and that was that. The date arrives and I hear my mom knocking on the door downstairs, calling my name. My dog, who loved her, got excited when she heard her voice and ran down ahead to greet her. She got to the door, freaked the hell out and ran back upstairs to me. I refused to go down and open the door. The phone started ringing and the knocking stopped. I picked up the phone to hear my mom say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I have to stay one more day here. I'll head home tomorrow. TLDR. Something pretended to be my mom. Didn't fool the dog. What if that was your mom and the one that came back was the imposter? Stop it. Too late." I've posted about this before, but when I was about 9 years old, 1995, in the middle of a bright summer day, I went to the refrigerator to get a popsicle. Suddenly a roughly teenage looking guy, with long brown hair, wearing a beige turtleneck and red plaid bell bottoms, turned around the corner into the hallway to my left, then vanished from toe to head as I looked at him. Told no one about it for years, until after my mother mentioned meeting the, now grown, kids who lived in the house before us, who asked her if she'd seen the bell-bottom ghost. Or, there's something sweet and not terrifying about a ghost in red plaid bell-bottoms. It's like, yeah, we call him Greg. He's our bell-bottom ghost from the 1970s. At least the old Timmy ghosts get to look fly in their period dress. Imagine if your restless spirit had to walk the earth forever in bell-bottoms. Plaid bell-bottoms. Do you get to pick what your ghost wears, or is it just whatever you die in? Cause I don't want my ghost to be wearing a tattered oversized t-shirt, socks, and no pants. You feel me? That would be an awkward afterlife. Maybe the lounge where ghosts just make a point of not appearing and leave the apparition stuff to the ones that died in fancy dresses and suits. About a year ago, my co-worker and I went to get coffee at a new coffee shop that opened up by our work. I was dealing with a lot of anxiety over my future. Anyway, while in line there was a woman in front of me. She was giving her order when she stopped mid-sentence and looks behind her to see me. She turns back around, gives the barista her order. After I give my order, she comes up to me and, "Hey, I know this is going to sound weird, but do you know a man named Jim?" Her words took me off guard because Jim was my grandpa. He died of cancer. He didn't live in the same state as I did, so I doubt he and this woman would have ever met him. I told her yes, he was my grandpa, and she told me that he wanted me to know that I needed to stop worrying because everything was going to be okay. Me crying in the middle of the coffee store in front of my bewildered co-worker and a couple of strangers. I hope you're doing better now. Life is too precious to let anxiety control us. I still have anxiety, but I've been learning to manage it a lot better now. You are right, life is way too short to worry about things outside of your control. My best friend's dad, who was a second father to me, came to me in a dream and told me to tell my best friend that he loved her and that he was sorry. I woke up to my cell phone ringing to find it was my best friend, absolutely hysterical, telling me that he finally passed away from sclerosis. I sobbed all day. He was a drunk our whole lives, but it still hurt. Did you tell her? How did she react? My dad died 2 years ago. My brother was at his house down the street. My children and I were laying on my bed talking about all the great times with my dad when the back door opened and closed. I crept down the hall to see who came in, and my brother called while I was in the hall. He said, "It's over," and I said, "What?" And he said, "Get over here." Dad came to tell us he had passed. I have no doubt. For the next month I would catch a whiff of his cigarettes or his cologne, especially when I was having a hard time. I'm sure he was just making sure I would get through the tough time. On Monday I called a local restaurant to see if they had any cinnamon rolls left because my pregnant wife really wanted a cinnamon roll. I walked in and before I could say anything the woman behind the counter asked how many cinnamon rolls I want. My first time buying from them too. I asked how she knew and with a completely straight face said, "Oh sorry, I have a lot of witches in my family. Maybe business was slow and she figured you were coming in since you called," and then walked into the restaurant by himself. Probably pretty easy to put the two together. I worked for an online retailer warehouse for a few months. There were 2 depressing windows that obviously were the bare minimum required for zoning that I probably walked by 1,000 times a day. Outside you'd see a concrete retaining wall and some trucks. Obviously after a while I'd barely see out of my periphery. Wall, trucks, trucks, wall. Until one day I saw trucks and then in the second window, pigs. It was only a second but I definitely saw a bunch of massive pigs in fenced in areas, with the rolling hills beyond. Of course, when I looked back, no pigs. For the next few weeks I stared out the windows when I went past, always seeing nothing but that wall. It was only when I got lazy and stopped paying attention that it happened again. Pigs, hill, then look back and gone. Apparently the land used to be a farm. Never found out if it was a pig farm. I like to think it's a flash of the past and not the ghosts of bacon. I love this one. A woman in a glowing white dress in the woods. Number. Levitating objects. Number. Shadow people. Nope. Pigs. Spectral piggies. In high school I was sitting in a friend's living room. First time ever in this house. I could describe every room in the house. Floor plans. Unused pool table in the basement against a wall. Piled with boxes. Freaky feeling. I ended up in a part of town that I had never been to and everything was as in the dream. The same woman with her carts after doing laundry. The church a few blocks away. The path I took to avoid talking to people. Still don't know what it meant but nothing else happened so it probably wasn't a big deal. Years and years ago I went on a walk late at night with my then boyfriend. Down a street I'd never been on before. I got the strongest sense of deja vu like I'd been there before. I said I can't cut through this path on the side of someone's yard to the next street. I'd seen it before and it felt like it didn't end well. He didn't freak out and was really understanding. I never found out what was at the end of that path because we turned around and took another direction. Actually, your story reminded me of another redditor who said that they had this dream a few times of scuba diving and they found this cave and they went in. But they would wake up before they found out what happened. That they went on vacation with their friends or class and they went scuba diving and found the exact cave. They had a bad feeling so they didn't go in and they never had the dream again after that. Was in my aunt's house with my mom. We were waiting on a repairman since she had to work and heard footsteps upstairs in my grandmother's room. This was a few months after she had passed and we both knew we were the only ones in that house. Soon as that girl left we were gone. That house always creeped me out. Has a history and someone I worked with had a friend that moved in there and never told her the stories until after she told me the creepiest things that happened in that house to her and her friend. Turned white as a sheet. What happened on your house? I'm currently living in an old 19th century funeral home and have a skull from a native in the basement. And man does it give off weird vibes. Have you thought about returning the skull to its descendants or giving it a proper burial? That would super creep me out. Believe me, I want to. It's currently my grandma's. Who got it from my great grandfather Bill. He was a dentist and moved into his office and was given it. It's back from a time where universities would dig up the dead for medical research. I have no idea where to start, and I've been told it's either native or African due to its high cheekbones. It used to have all of its teeth. Now it's missing its back molars. It is so eerie being near it, and having it out of the box is so unsettling. I tried to take my parents out for Chinese, but my dad grabbed the bill. As I opened up my fortune cookie, I argued that it was my idea and therefore I should pay. He would hear none of it. My fortune cookie said, "You should pick up the bill." He still didn't let me pay. Nothing bad immediately happened, but I wonder what would have happened if I had been allowed to pay. So I guess you're the reason we have Trump as president, and that I'm bald. Thanks a lot. And my wife left me. Touring a haunted house in Savannah, Georgia. Took a picture near the entrance and my phone went all weird. And I got a weird static photo with faces in them. So I tied an onion to my belt, which was the style at the time. Haha, okay Abe Simpson. Thanks. Not me but my mom, sister, and brother went to a doctor's appointment and almost collided with a vehicle that probably would have killed them. My mom and sister both swear they saw my dad push them out of the woods. This was a couple weeks after he passed away. Playing with a Ouija board. Had done it many times, but this one time they claimed to be a great aunt of someone present. It was odd, but not scary. Every time subsequent to that aunt, what's her name, always showed up. Eventually just stopped taking it out. So, you ghosted a ghost? I guess so. Back when I lived at my dad's house, in my room I was sleeping, I usually kept the TV on. But this night I had trouble sleeping, so I turned it off. Eventually I fell asleep but was startled awake by a really tight grip on my ankle. My body was still partially asleep, so it was very hard to move my body. I did not see anything besides my leg getting lifted up some, and then I started getting pulled off the bed. I am a big guy, so that would take a pretty strong person to do that. I was able to grab onto the edge of my mattress and pull myself back, then grabbing the remote and turning the TV on to have some light, and seeing nothing at the end of my bed. I turned the light on and checked my entire room and there was nothing out of the ordinary. Still no idea what happened. It was angry you turned off the TV. It was still watching that. Not me, but my brother. Our mom died when I was 17 and he was 15. Brother was sobbing in his room alone when someone began rubbing his back in a comforting manner. There was no one else in the room except for him. So very sorry for your loss. As a mom with a 15-year-old son, your second sentence brought tears. A co-worker of mine passed suddenly, less than a year ago. Young, less than 40 years old, and had a son maybe 3 years older than my oldest. Used to babysit him when I had days off after I resigned. We worked very well together. Kind of like how one has a work spouse. Nothing at all romantic, we just always got along great. Anyway, less than a week after he died, he came to me in my dreams, telling me he's okay. and his son is in good hands. He had recently been divorced. He told me not to worry, and he's very much at peace. I gave him a big bear hug, as we sometimes did when we knew we wouldn't see each other. For instance, after I resigned, I woke up crying. I still smelled his aftershave when I woke up. My heart still aches for his family's loss. However, him telling me he's at peace takes some weight off my shoulders, and while I miss him, I know that he'd be pissed off if I started worrying again. I feel better when I think about him now, because, while I'm not religious or anything, or really believe in an afterlife, I know that he is okay. I had a dream my dog had gone to a distant corner of our heavily wooded backyard and dug a hole to get out, which was odd because he wasn't a digger. He was stuck on the other side of the chain link fence because the hole was at a steep angle and he couldn't squeeze back through. I lifted the fence up enough for him to get back through. The next day I got home and the yard was eerily quiet. He'd usually run up to greet me. I thought of the dream and walked straight to the corner where I found him waiting on the other side of the fence and let him in. Isn't this weird? Have you had other dreams like this? I have them from time to time. Little glimpses of the future. My nan had always believed in a heaven life after death. I had never really given this a thought until a few days after she passed away. I was in a pretty bad place. I was really close to my nan, so her passing had crushed me, and when I was thinking of her I remembered that she believed in heaven. So I said, "Nan, if you're really watching over me from a heaven, give me some kind of sign." A few seconds later an alarm on my phone starts going off. Thing is, I never set any alarm to go off. The phone was full on charge and in good condition. There was no reason for this alarm to go off at all, yet it decided to go off right then. Probably was a huge coincidence, but I like to think it was my nan answering me. When my uncle died some years ago now, my aunt at the time was struggling bad. They had just had a child. He passed from a motorbike accident. My aunt told me she was begging and pleading for a sign from him, and a transformer on the power line outside her bedroom window blew in a shower of sparks and noise. Most likely a huge coincidence, but that is how he would make his presence known, I would think. Who knows? While visiting a haunted facility, I was overcome with extreme sadness and started to sob uncontrollably. I never felt anything like that in my life. It was incredibly scary and surreal. I have a recurring dream that I swear is either a repressed or suppressed memory. In it, I'm 3 years old and riding my tricycle. It's very late in the evening, when the sun has gone down far enough so that the only hints of sunset are orange lines on the horizon. But the street lights haven't yet come on. My mother is rinsing out some paintbrushes with a garden hose, keeping an eye on me as I pedal around the yard. Suddenly, she drops the hose and runs into the house, and I'm looking down on her while going up very rapidly. Then I wake up, with the strange feeling that something has been taken from me, but I don't know what. For most of my life, I didn't put much into it. Then, I started reading about alien abductees, and noting parallels between my recurring dream and their supposed experiences. Maybe I was briefly taken, maybe not, but it's something to think about nonetheless. Surely you've mentioned this to your mum? I have. But she gets real forceful about saying that it never happened and it's just a weird dream that I keep having. I know, even over 30 years later, that she was into oil painting, and would try to rinse and reuse the brushes as much as she could. I also remember seeing, in the dream, a red, white and blue frisbee on top of the house. When I was 5, my grandfather was sweeping pine needles and leaves off the roof of the house, and tossed down a red, white and blue frisbee, saying that my uncle had thrown it up there before I was born. My tricycle was also gone after the earliest time I can remember having this dream. Mum says it was stolen. Grandpa said he accidentally ran over it with his car and threw it away. I get sleep paralysis a lot years ago. I always saw a girl in a white gown with long black hair covering her face creeping up towards me, but I always snapped out before she could come inches towards my face. My husband and I were traveling through New South Wales, Australia, and stayed at a lovely motel. In the morning we went down to breakfast and most of the other people had already left, so we were almost alone. Suddenly a glass flew across an empty table and landed on the floor. I was facing that direction and fully saw it as if it was pushed across the table. I looked behind me at the only other couple and they were wide-eyed and confused. Apparently the motel has a permanent resident that likes attention. I remember when I was kid, if I would stay up sorta late I would see shadow people dancing around my room. Now I know you're probably thinking, oh, it was your imagination cause you were young or something, but both my sisters complained about seeing them too until we moved houses. Several years ago I had a pretty bad mental breakdown. I started seeing shadow people out of the corner of my eye or around corners. Like I'd be watching TV and in my peripheral vision, I'd see a shape stick its head around the wall like they were standing in the hallway and spying on me. I heard my name spoken quite a bit. I've often wondered if I wasn't more sensitive to things I couldn't normally see or hear during that time. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.